To protect my privacy, I have decided to keep my name anonymous. I'm not sure how to begin my story, but I'll do the best I can. I guess I'll start by informing you about the show Blue's Clues. For those of you who have never watched it, Blue's Clues is a show for young children that was created in 1996 and lasted for 10 years, with a total of 6 seasons and 142 episodes. The show involves Steve, or Joe, looking for clues and solving mysteries with the help from the audience. Blue is an animated dog who was labeled the clues with her paw prints. Blue's Clues was a hit with many little kids, including me. The idea was original and the artwork was amazing. However, Steve Burns was the backbone of the show. Steve Burns was the actor who played Steve. He was more serious than Barney the dinosaur, but he loved kids and knew exactly how to make them happy. There was just something magical about his enthusiasm that made me want to watch more and more of his episodes. The saddest part of my childhood was when Steve left the show in 2002 and pursued a musical career. Steve was replaced by Donovan Patton, who was the actor for Joe, but he wasn't the same. I stopped watching Blue's Clues after Steve left. The show just lost its magic for me. Joe wasn't anything like Steve. It was total goofball, and my mother told me that Donovan Patton was acting too hard. When I turned 16, my family moved to a large three-storied house in upstate New York that was previously owned by a nice old lady. A few weeks after moving in, I had decided to do some exploring in the attic. I found an old trunk, and to my surprise, it was filled with a bunch of old VHS tapes. All of them were Blue's Clues tapes. I knew the old lady's cell phone number, so I decided to call her and ask her about the tapes. She told me that she bought them from a collector a few years back for her little grandson to watch. After I thanked her and hung up, I emptied the trunk before checking the tapes. All of them had episodes that I've already watched except for one. The one tape I found was just a regular sticker, not a factory sticker like the other tapes had. The title on the sticker was Blue's Clues Sorrow. I thought that it was as the title a little strange, but I figured that it was just a copy of Steve Goes to College episode. The one where Steve goes off to college and Joe takes his place. Because Steve said goodbye to all of his friends in that episode. I considered it to be a very sorrowful indeed. When my parents went on their anniversary trip and left me in charge of the house one night, I figured that it was a perfect opportunity to check out the tape. Our TV has a VCR, and I have to admit, I felt a tingle of excitement when I placed the tape in the player. I was about to relive my childhood memories of watching Blue's Clues. I didn't care that I was too old to watch it, and I knew for sure I would enjoy it. At least that's what I thought. The episode started off completely normal. The Blue's Clues book opened up and Steve looked out of his window of his yellow house. "Hi out there, it's me, Steve. Have you seen Blue? Wait, she's not here. Well, come on in." The front door opened and Steve was in the living room looking concerned. "I need to tell you something important. Blue is at the vet hospital and is having an operation on her heart. I hope she's okay." Steve stopped talking and looked down on the floor. The scene ended. The next scene showed Steve at the vet. He sat in the waiting room without making a sound. He did nothing but stare at the doors which led to the operating rooms. A surgeon opened the door, but she wasn't an animated character. She was a real person. She whispered something in Steve's ear, but I could hear everything she said. Her heart stopped beating. "We tried our best, but we couldn't get it to beat again. I'm sorry." The scene then ended. The next scene started with a title card that saying a month had passed after Blue's funeral. A deep voice spoke. "There are 5 stages in the grieving process: denial, anger, bargaining, depression, and acceptance." The voice said, "Steve will experience 3 stages all at once: depression, anger, and mental illness." Steve was in his bedroom, lying in his bed, and he began to cry. The color of the episode turned black and white, like a depressing old photograph. Steve cried so hard that his breathing grew shallow. Then the scene ended. The next scene shows Steve sitting up on his bed as he stopped crying. His face was now red and his teeth were clenched tightly. Steve held his stuffed anteater Horace with both of his hands and screams, "Blue!" at the top of his lungs. His screams sent chills down my spine. Steve ripped off Horace's head, and black ooze squirted out from the stuffed animal's neck. Steve then threw Horace in a fit of rage. When the anteater landed, its ooze was completely covered the floor. I fought the urge to vomit against my better judgment. I decided to keep watching. Steve's body began to turn into a darker and darker color by the second. After about 5 seconds, Steve then turned completely black. When he got out of bed, he walked to his bedroom and walked into the living room. I thought he was going to sit in his big red thinking chair, but he didn't. He stood in front of the chair and stared at the screen for a full minute. His eyes lost their pupils and it became nothing more than white dots as he started crying again. His white tears streamed down his face. Some sad piano music began to play, and the music was so heartbreaking. I shed a few tears myself. A message flashed across the screen said, "You can't figure it out, Blue's Clues, but you can't figure out insanity." The scene then ended. The next scene shows Steve still standing in the living room. He was no longer crying. His body was completely normal color. "I can't live without Blue," he said. "She was my best friend. She gave me life and happiness and meaning, and without her, I have nothing to live for." The kids in the background that helped Steve find the clues began to cry and whimper. They shouted, "Please don't do it, Steve. We love you. We're your friends too." "I'm sorry," Steve said. "I'm sorry if I break your hearts for doing this, but I have no other choice. Goodbye." He held up a container and the camera zoomed in on the label, which said potassium cyanide. Steve had a calm look on his face as he swallowed the contents of the container. He instantly collapsed onto the carpet. He foamed at the mouth while his body twitched and thrashed on the floor like if he was being electrocuted. Steve eventually stopped moving, and I knew that he was dead. The episode finally ended as my TV cut to static. I sat still, dazed, and it took my brain a few minutes to comprehend what I just watched. I made my decision then and decided to play detective to find out where in the world this episode came from. I looked up the name of the episode online but came up with nothing. I knew that the company Viacom owned Blue's Clues because of their company name was shown on every factory sticker of the other VHS tapes. After a bit of research, I wrote a letter to the Viacom headquarters. I told them about my experience and asked them if they were about where the tape came from. 2 weeks later, I got a reply in the mail. "Dear Mr. Thank you for taking the time to write to us. We are quite surprised by your story of the unaired episode of Blue's Clues that you discovered. We are grateful that you contacted us concerning it. We can personally assure you that Viacom Media Networks, as well as Viacom, claims no ownership or liability whatsoever regarding the episode. However, we still feel that the explanation is in order. Unfortunately, we are unable to provide any details of the tape's creation. We could simply do not know how this happened. Back in 2002, we received a VHS tape in a package with no return address. The words Mr. Ted were written on the package. Along with the tape, there was a letter from Mr. Ted stating that he was a biggest fan of the Blue's Clues series and asked for our approval of his his fan-made creation on television. We were quite flattered that a fan would send us a fan-made episode for airing. However, when our editors viewed the episodes for the reframement, they were all applied to its nature. A few of the staff who viewed the episode unbelievably went to a shock and had to be transported to the emergency room immediately. Due to the horrifying content, we had absolutely no plans to air this episode. We passed the tape to a private collector, but we were in dismay to discover that he had many copies made. We ask that you please do not release the contents of the tape or this letter to the public, as we do not want to upset the fans or viewers who love and support our shows for young children. With warm regards, Michael D. Fricklas, Executive Vice President, Journal of Consul and Secretary. Questions bounced inside my head, and they still do to this day. Who is Mr. Ted? How was he able to create this demonic episode? Is he even, human? Out of respect of Viacom, I am afraid I cannot provide footage. However, I figured that releasing a single screenshot and a copy of the letter to the public wouldn't make them too angry. You're probably wondering, why are you telling me this? What is the point of this story? Well, to be honest, I just want to get off my chest, and I've kept this a secret for a while, but I eventually felt the desire to tell someone, whether they believed in me or not. Part of my brain told me to throw the tape away in the letter, but I have kept them closest to me, and they kept them both in my closet to remind me what I experienced that day was real. Now I realize that some so-called fans of TV shows are not as normal as you may think they are. And that, my little pretties, was Blue's Clues Sorrow, a Blue's Clues Lost episode creepypasta written by Suomynona404. My final thoughts on this story? This might be an unpopular opinion, but I actually find this story to be quite decent. Maybe not the best creepypasta I've seen, but I definitely have to say, I actually find this one to be a decent creepypasta. Now, I'm pretty sure this is like an unpopular opinion, but I am going to state the reasons why I like this story, but I do have some problems and reasons as to why I do not like this story. Now, before I go on to what I did not like about this story, I'm going to sit here and say this right now, that this story was written by the same author named Sumammonia 404, the same person who did the Crystal Pepsi story, which I narrated that like a couple days ago, maybe a week ago or something, I'm not sure, but I remember reading Crystal Pepsi by that author, like not too long ago. So that's pretty surprising. I did not even know that. Now, anyways, I discovered this story from when Andal narrated this story sometime back in 2017. I wasn't really that interested in narrating creepypastas at the time, but I really was starting to get into listening to creepypasta narrators. Now, I have to say, it's a pretty good story, and I really do like how this concept of itself seemed interesting. You know, the VHS tape was somewhat found in the trunk up in the attic. It wasn't found, on the mailbox, or somebody picked it up from the side of the road. I'm glad it doesn't have any of that, which is thankfully the case, because most creepypastas literally start with having VHS tapes in the mailbox, or buy it from the store or something, or even buying them online. I'm willing to somewhat excuse the VHS tape because it doesn't seem to, be mainly the issue or something. Because I'm going to sit here and say this right now, that I was actually very surprised on how this story came to be. Like, I mean, I have not actually taken a look at this story in like a while. I think the last time I did was back in 2019, but yeah, I'm very surprised. Now, I do like how this story went out. It actually had a very good concept regarding how well this story was made. I mean, I actually seen this story myself. Like, I've seen other narrators narrate this, so I really have to say it's a really interesting pasta, I'm not gonna lie. It's a pretty interesting concept, and I really do like how this all went out to be a very well-made pasta. Like, it's a really good pasta, grammar-wise and all that. Like, I remember seeing how good this pasta really is. I mean, it's not a terrible creepy pasta, but I do have some things that I didn't really like about this story. But before I get on with that, I'm going to sit here and say this. The story, it's not a terrible one, but I do wish that there was a few things that, I needed to mention a few things, but before I do that, I want to calmly sit there and, go through certain things. But before I do that, I'm going to, sit there and go with what I liked. Now, the startup of this story was pretty interesting. Like, it's, the person explaining, what about the creepypasta of its own self, which, I mean, most Lost episode pastas really don't go into full detail that much, explaining the TV show and that, but for some reason, this actually worked really well. Like, this story actually had somewhat of an interesting concept for what this story really is. I mean, I really do find this story to be, enjoyable, well made in detail, and I like the concept. So, I mean, the grammar was good in this story, and same with the sentence structuring. It was beautifully well written and beautifully well done with, the sentence structuring and paragraph structuring and all that. So that's a bonus for the author. It's very good. I mean, another thing I would have to say is that the VHS cliche, I'm willing to excuse that because, I'm willing to excuse the VHS tape cliche because, for whatever reason, VHS cliches, I know they've been done to death, but for some reason, I'm willing to excuse it because it's not, found in a mailbox or found it online or anything like that. The episode goes out, pretty interesting with Steve, getting depressed and all, but when it gets to, later on, cliches are happening, Steve turned completely black with, his eyes, going white you know, with pupils and all. I mean, I really didn't think that was really necessary to add into the story. That just didn't really work well with the story. At least that's just what it is to me. I'm not sure exactly, but it most likely just didn't work really well. And I'm just stating that as a fact really right now. Now, another thing I really would have to say that I really did not care for the story per se. It's not a terrible part, but I would have to make a mention of it was the fact that Steve goes into depression all at the same time. I'm not really a fan of creepypastas that have characters go into depression unless it plays well or something, or it has an originality to it. Then that could be one thing, but at the same time it just didn't really work out that great. I'm just stating that just to be honest. So another thing I really would have to say, and this is kind of an issue with the story, but yet again, I really don't exactly know too well. But another thing I really have to say was the fact that the letter seemed pretty interesting and all that. But another thing, this is a major problem that I really did not care for the story, was the fact that Steve takes his own life by taking his own life by swallowing some sort of contents of whatever poison it is. I mean, like, come on, like, that doesn't really work with the story. I know this is like one of the fewer Lost episode creepypastas that were not very cliched, but like, come on, seeing, ended it off with, a character, taking his or her own life, like that near the episode. It doesn't work. Like, I'm not trying to diss the author or anything, it just didn't work with this story, and, it doesn't work at all. Like, I'm not denying that now, I'm just saying. So, there's definitely that. Another big thing about this story I really did not care for was the ending of the story. Like, the ending of the story did somewhat have, like, an explanation of the episode, but the one thing I really have to say is that who is Mr. Ted? Like, there's no explanation on who Mr. Ted is. I have a theory that he's probably maybe an executive of maybe Blue's Clues, or maybe was executive. I'm not sure, but like, it is possible, but I really don't know. The story of its own self seemed to be having an interesting concept with it, but at the same time, certain cliches and all that, it just didn't work with the story, and that's mainly what I have to say. So, yeah. It's not a terrible story. I really have to say it's a pretty good concept for what this story really did for. Like, it's not a terrible story, but it does play a part in it, and that's just me being honest. So, yeah. Just to be 100% honest, this story, it's a decent story. I'm not really crazy fan of, the fact, that the episode seemed to be cliche too. But, it's an older story, so I'm willing to give it the benefit of the doubt. But yet again, that's just me seeing it here or there. So, like I'm gonna say, it's a decent pasta. Maybe not the best Lost Episode 1, but, it's actually one of the fewer ones I really seem to find they very enjoyable. So, I guess with that being the case, and with that being said, I'm going to sit here and wrap up the review. Now, like I'm going to say right now, this is simply my own personal opinion, and if you happen to disagree with me, that's fine too. We're all entitled to our own opinions regards to these creepypastas, and this is simply my own personal thoughts. My final rating of the story would have to be I'm gonna give this one a 7.5 out of 10. It was a very interesting pasta. It had a very interesting concept. Wasn't really, a major, fan of this story. Well, like, I like the story, but I wasn't really a major fan of the cliches and any unnecessary details regarding what was in this, movie, so that was actually one of the reasons why I didn't really, care about. But other than that, the story seemed to be interesting. It was okay. Not terrible, but not perfect. But it's actually one of the few pastas that are mediocre. But other than that, it was an alright one. And it was a decent pasta, so that's just my opinion. Anyways, what did you guys think about this curry pasta? Did you all enjoy it? Did you all not? Also, what we have done personally to help make this story a lot better. Feel free to leave me know what your thoughts are down in the comments below. I'm the Queen of Lions. Thank you so much for watching today's episode, and if you're new to my channel, be sure to like, comment, and subscribe because I make brand new videos every single day. Don't forget to ring the notification bell to when I upload, so that way you guys will not miss an upload. And as always, please roll the outro because I'm out.